Ryan had never been a fan of crowded places. The noise of the city, the constant grind of people pressing against each other in traffic, the neon lights that seemed to burn his eyes long after midnight, all of it had started to eat at him. Claire, his girlfriend, had suggested the trip. A lake house, remote, quiet, surrounded by trees and open water. They had found a listing online, and though the photos were grainy, the place looked charming enough. The old wooden dock stretched far out. Into the lake, the trees stood tall and dark like guardians around the property, and there was even a little rowboat tied to the pier. To Claire, it looked perfect. To Ryan, it looked like a decent escape. Neither of them saw what hid beneath the water dot. The drive out took them most of the day. By the time they arrived, the sun had begun to sink into the tree line. The house appeared. Older than in the picture, shutters slightly crooked, the wood siding swollen from years of damp air, the porch sagging under its own weight. Ryan carried their bags inside, and the smell hit them almost immediately. Dampness, the kind that seemed baked into the walls, as though the house itself had been submerged for years. Claire wrinkled her nose, but forced a smile. They wanted this weekend. They wanted peace. The silence around the lake was heavy, broken only by the occasional groan of the trees in the wind. The first night was calm enough. They opened a bottle of wine, sat on the porch, and watched the last rays of sunlight fade over the water. The surface of the lake gleamed like glass, dark and still. But as the moon rose, Claire swore she saw ripples where there shouldn't have been any. Just faint disturbances, like something shifting underneath. She mentioned it to Ryan, who laughed it off, saying it was probably fish or the wind. Yet the trees had gone still. The wind had stopped, and the lake kept breathing. Inside the house, the atmosphere was heavier. The walls carried a faint dripping sound, as though water moved inside them. In the upstairs bedroom, a single dark stain spread across the ceiling. It was circular, resembling a bloated eye. Ryan ignored it. He always ignored the small things. Claire, though, found herself staring at it as they lay in bed, waiting for sleep. Just before she drifted off, she thought she heard a whisper rising through the floorboards, carried on some unseen current. "Join us." The morning came with fog thick enough to swallow the trees. Ryan decided to go fishing off the dock while Claire brewed coffee. He set his line, sat back, and stared into the whiteness that had replaced the world. The lake was still again, perfectly still. Minutes turned to an hour with nothing biting. Then suddenly the rod bent with violent force. Excitement shot through Ryan as he wrestled with it, imagining the size of the fish. The line cut against his palms, pulling harder and harder. He yanked back with all his strength until finally, with a sickening snap, whatever was hooked tore through the surface dotted. Wasn't a fish. A strip of flesh hung from the hook. Human flesh, pale and waterlogged, torn ragged at the edges. It dripped onto the wooden boards with a wet smack. Ryan dropped the rod instantly, heart hammering in his chest. He looked at the water, but there was nothing there, only his own reflection distorted by ripples. He convinced himself it was some kind of animal hide, a prank left behind. He didn't tell Claire. He couldn't. That night, Claire woke to a sound at the window. Slow tapping like wet fingers against the glass. She sat up, her heart frozen in her throat. Something stood outside, barely visible in the moonlight. A woman soaked from head to toe, her hair clinging to her face in tangled strands. Her eyes were empty sockets, hollow black pits, and water streamed endlessly down her cheeks like tears. When Claire gasped, the woman pressed a hand against the glass. The skin sloughed from her palm, leaving a smear of blood and rot. Claire screamed. Ryan bolted upright, but by the time he looked, the window was empty. Only streaks of moisture trailing downward. Claire refused to sleep again. every creak of the house amplified in the darkness. Sometime after 3, she heard footsteps pacing above them in the attic. Heavy, dragging footsteps. Yet there was no attic, only the roof. Ryan grabbed a flashlight and climbed the narrow ladder to check the crawl space. The beam flickered over damp beams and cobwebs until it landed on something in the corner. A shape. Small, motionless. He crawled closer and nearly dropped the light. It was a body. The desiccated remains of a man curled against the wall, his skin gray and paper-thin, his lips peeled back in a permanent scream. The stench of rot hit. Him, gagging. He stumbled backward, but when he turned the light again, the corner was empty. Sleep was impossible. By dawn, both of them looked hollow-eyed and sickly. Claire suggested they leave, but the car wouldn't start. Ryan cursed, slamming. The hood shut. They were stranded, at least until someone came down the road. But no cars had passed since they arrived. The silence outside had only grown deeper. That evening, Ryan returned to the dock, desperate to shake the claustrophobia of the house. He stood staring into the lake. The reflection of the sky seemed darker than it should, as though the water swallowed more light than it reflected. Something moved beneath the surface. A pale hand brushed against the underside of the dock. He staggered back, but before he could run, the water erupted. Corpses, dozens of them, bloated and half-rotted, clawed their way onto the dock. Their mouths hung open, water gushing out with every step. Their eyes were glazed, their limbs twisted. From the weight of drowning, one lurched toward him, its jaw dangling loose, exposing jagged teeth beneath. Ryan grabbed a piece of wood and swung wildly, cracking its skull. The head split, thick black water pouring out like tar. But more kept coming. He ran for the house, slamming the door shut. Claire screamed when she saw him, his shirt soaked in gore. The floorboards shook as something heavy moved across the porch. The corpses were outside. The whispers grew louder, echoing through the walls. Join us, bleed with us, basement. They fled down the narrow steps, locking the door behind them. The air grew colder with every step. The smell of rot was overpowering. Claire shone the flashlight across the room, and the beam fell on shapes piled in the corner. Bones, dozens of them. Skulls gnawed to jagged fragments, ribs snapped in half, femurs slick with old blood. Some still had bits of flesh clinging to them. The walls dripped with water that wasn't water, it was blood, running thick and black, streaking down into the dirt floor. Claire gagged, covering her mouth. Then she saw something move within the pile. A face. A drowned face, eyes wide and milky, staring straight at her. It opened its mouth, releasing a gush of water that smelled of sewage and rot. The pile shifted. Bodies, hundreds of them, crawled from the dirt, pulling themselves free with broken fingers, nails snapping off as they reached. The basement door above burst open. Hands, pale and wet, clawed through the frame. Claire screamed as the corpses dragged themselves down the steps. Ryan swung the flashlight, desperate for escape, but they were surrounded. One grabbed his arm, its fingers sinking deep into his. Flesh, skin tore away in ribbons, peeling like wet paper. Blood sprayed across the concrete. Ryan howled in agony, trying to tear free, but another corpse sank its teeth into his shoulder, crunching bone, tearing muscle. He could feel his ribs snap beneath its jaw. Claire tried to pull him away, but more hands wrapped around her legs. Her nails scraped against the floor, leaving bloody trails as they dragged her toward the pile. She kicked, screaming, but they were relentless. Fingers hooked into her mouth, tearing at her cheeks until the skin split. Blood poured down her neck, soaking her shirt. She shrieked, voice warping into gargles as water filled her lungs. Ryan's vision blurred with pain, but he saw her pulled beneath the mass of bodies, her limbs twisting unnaturally before vanishing into the earth. Her screams cut off in a choking gurgle. Then silence. Hands seized Ryan's head, cold lips pressed against his ear, whispering, "The lake keeps what it takes." And then they dragged him upward toward the surface. He thrashed, but the corpses were stronger, pulling him through the floor, through the soil, until he felt cold water flood his mouth, his lungs bursting. Darkness swallowed him as something sharp pierced his chest, snapping his sternum. Blood poured into the lake, mixing with the black tide. His heart pounded once, twice, then stopped. The lake went still again. The moon shone over its surface, reflecting a perfect mirror. Only a faint ripple spread outward, red blooming beneath. Like ink, the dock stood empty, the house quiet. And deep beneath the water, new voices whispered, joining the chorus of the drowned.
Please like and subscribe channel Fear Frequency for more horror stories. Thank you.